Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the New York Federation of Solid Waste and Recycling, our first ever virtual technical program. I am Kelli Timbrook. I'm a project manager at Casella Resource Solutions, as well as the president of NYS 3, which I will tell you more about later. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, this conference was forced to cancel the May 2020 in-person conference, as well as the rescheduled October 2020 conference, and we ended up with this virtual sessions. All three associations agreed that we wanted to keep our dedicated attendees and members. We wanted to provide our dedicated attendees and members a chance to reconnect and learn what is happening in the waste and recycling industry, which, as we all know, doesn't stop and definitely is an essential service. Over the next 2 weeks, we will provide you with 4 separate sessions of varying topics. As registrants, you are welcome to attend all of them or the ones that you find most applicable. The logins for the sessions will be distributed the week the sessions are held. We want to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and moderators for volunteering their time to prepare a presentation and taking time out of their busy schedules to be available today to present. I would also like to thank Barton and LaJudas, who has provided all of the Zoom webinar platform technical assistance, as well as Luann's invaluable time and work to pull this virtual conference together. In addition, I'd like to thank NYS as they provided the opportunity for us to issue the PDHs. I'd also like to thank the subcommittee who helped with the planning, including Rich Bills, Bruce Howie, Russ Rutowski, Savannah Brutowski, and Lisa Ruggiero. Next, I have a few housekeeping items to note. As I mentioned, we're using the Zoom webinar platform. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. To submit questions, please use the Q&A box, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. The chat box has been disabled and will not be in use. You're welcome to enter your questions at any time during the presentation, and then the moderator will address the questions at the end for the individual's presentation or at the end of the 3 presentations. We're also recording this for future use. So our first item up on the agenda is to introduce the 3 organizations which comprise the Federation of the New York Solid Waste Association. I will go first as the president of NYSAR, the New York State Association for Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Can everybody see that okay? All right. So NYSAR, as I said, the New York Association for Reduction, Reuse, or Recycling, or NYSAR 3. We are a network of recycling and materials management professionals dedicated to benefiting the economy, environment, and society by reducing waste and promoting sustainable materials management in New York. There are many ways to become involved with NYSAR. We have various active committees such as the Organics Committee, Legislative Committee, and 2 new committees that we have formed just this past year or so, the W4R, which is the Women in Recycling Industry, and the Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion Committee. Info about all of these can be found at nysar3.org. NYSAR also hosts an annual recycling conference, which this year is also virtual as well. That's coming up November 17th through 19th, and you still have time to register under the early bird pricing through Monday, so another couple of days there. And then members of NYSAR also will receive discounted pricing for this Federation conference May of next year and however long you remain a member. So please join us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rich Bills for an introduction to NYSASWAN. Rich?
All right, thanks, Kelli. My name is Rich Bills, president of the New York State Association for Solid Waste Management, or NYSASWAN. First off, I'd like to thank Luann and the rest of the Federation for stepping up and being motivated and flexible enough to pull this virtual conference off. Conferences are big, I think, for all of us in these organizations to get together and share ideas. So this is the first virtual conference that I've been a part of. And so far, I've been impressed. We've had excellent presenters covering a range of important topics. and it's been very manageable to fit in the daily schedule. So that's been a nice job. I'd also like to thank Barton LaJudas for being our loan sponsor and for pulling all the levers in the background and doing all the stuff that, all the work part of this in the background. So thank you. So what is NYSWAM? I pulled this clip out of our Constitution, and I think it sums things up fairly well. I'll read it. The purpose of this organization, a nonprofit organization, shall be to promote efficient solid waste management, to study, discuss, and recommend improvements in the art, to investigate and provide means for the exchange of ideas and experiences between members, to collect, analyze, and distribute information about the state of solid waste technology, to cooperate with other organizations, to promote more efficient management of solid waste in the state of New York. So I remember when I started in solid waste a number of years ago, and I didn't quite get what we were doing as solid waste managers at the time when I started. I knew we all had transfer stations and landfills and recycling programs and compost facilities and MRFs and incinerators and all that good stuff. But it seemed to me that there were different groups of people who would be advocates for one thing or the other. You know, you had your recyclers and you had your landfill guys, and it seemed to me that the recyclers wanted to recycle everything, landfill guys wanted to bury everything in the landfill. And you would talk to them, and they would both have good points. And I was confused. I'm like, what is the right move? What do you do? So today, I've come to the conclusion that there is no real one right move for everybody. You need to seek your own balance. Recycling markets fluctuate. Environmental regulations change. There are different socioeconomic characteristics in different places. And there's different factors that are subject to change. So the balance of the tools that you use as solid waste manager may have to change constantly. I think that's where NYSWAM comes in, for me at least. It's about getting professionals in the state together to study and discuss what's going on in solid waste. Talk about the issues and discuss the problems that we're facing today. How can we help each other to find the best solutions? And I think it's important that we continue to gather like we are today, to discuss and share our experiences. We continue to investigate solutions to the new problems. We continue to promote the best ideas so that we can all make the best decisions on how to manage our solid waste most effectively. And we share these things between ourselves, our memberships, and other organizations. So I'm very proud to be representing NYSWAM today, and NYSWAM is happy to be part of this conference. Last thing, one thing NYSWAM does is we put on the landfill operators training course, which is mandated training from the DEC. This year, we held probably the last live conference that happened in the world on March 10th, right before the COVID crisis hit. We got back from that and everything was closing. We are hoping to be able to offer that course again live in 2021. And at this point, it's anyone's guess whether we'll be able to or not. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that if we can't do it live, we will regroup and figure something out. But that's it for me. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and allow me to introduce Luann Meyer, President of SWANA, New York.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And as you can see, we have the Federation is made of 3 amazing organizations that all have a place in New York State and focus on the same but different aspects of the solid waste and resource management outlet. So since everyone else was thanking people, I want to thank NYSWAM because they originally canceled their fall conference in order for the Federation to host the October rescheduled in-person conference, which ended up turning into this virtual conference. So without them doing that, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So we all 3 work very closely together. And last week, you heard about how the three of us, the organizations, then also have another board on the Federation. And if all three of our organizations are in agreement about a concern, issue, topic, the Federation then will also support that or be against that topic. So power in numbers, I like to say. So I'm just going to share a couple slides as well. Give me 1 second. We all should be getting good at this. So I just want to focus on SWANA. SWANA stands for Solid Waste Association of North America. The difference between SWANA and NYSSWAM and NYSAR is that we are a chapter of a national membership of over 10,000 people. We have 10,000 members across the US, Canada, the Caribbean, and we just recently added Guam as a new chapter. So the New York chapter has over 450 members currently here in New York State. And we, as you can see, this is our mission. It's an organization of professionals committed to advancing from solid waste management to resource management through their shared emphasis on education, advocacy, and research. And those all go into our core values of education, advocacy, collaboration, and respect. On the national level and the education realm, SWANA has been very much involved with EPA, and as they move forward with the National Recycling Day, November 15th. And in moving things forward with that advocacy, we are often on calls on nationally. There's a Recover Act that is being proposed at the federal level to provide infrastructure and educational funding across the nation. We get involved in things like that. Obviously, we collaborate with things such as this. And then respect is just an obvious one. So as we're all doing pitches to join our organizations, I think that you should join all of them. They're all a benefit, but just to cover a couple of the things that SWANA can offer is that we have many chapter events. Well, we don't have chapter events. We tend to do a lot with the Federation and support NYSAR and NYSSWAM as they do their in-person events. But there are national events such as SWANApalooza, which will now become SOAR, WasteCon, those types of things where you really get a national perspective of the solid waste and recycling industry. But there's technical divisions, a lot of training and courses are available through SWANA as well. And then most importantly, I just want to mention that New York offers 50% off the first year's membership. But in addition to that, we provide free student membership. So anyone who is in college and a full-time student can join SWANA with all the benefits of a paying membership. And then we also encourage young professionals and we provide a low-cost membership option to them. And then last, I just wanted to throw up here all of our board members who work hard and continue to move forward the vision of SWANA and the chapter. And my email address is here, which you all have already. But if you ever have any questions about SWANA, please let me know. With that, I am all set. And I will stop my sharing and I will turn it over to Kelly. Kelly.
Well, all I'm going to do is introduce Bodhi. So Bodhi, if you'd like to get started on our session for the day.
Absolutely. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our session. I'm going to share our screen here. So today we are going to be talking about the struggling recycling markets in New York. I will be moderating. I'm Bodhi Piedmont-Fleischmann. I'm project manager with Tetra out of Middletown, New York, and also secretary for NYSAR 3, the New York State Association for Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling. So moving on, I guess our first topic, today we're going to focus on the realities of recycling today. We're going to look at changes that have occurred following market disruption back in 2018, the importance of developing markets for commodities that are collected and separated, and going to look at a detailed look at possible opportunities for improving and fixing recycling in New York State. So our panel today is Andrea Calarco with Casella. Andrea is the business development manager. She has over 14 years of experience in the solid waste and recycling industry. She currently holds the position of business development manager for municipal business for the Western region, collection, processing, recycling, sludge, food waste, and disposal. In this role, Andrea specializes in Casella's public-private partnerships, as well as oversees their government affairs and community engagement. Andrea has been instrumental in her ability to design and implement recycling education programs, bring value-added services to partners and customers, and stay up to date on current legislation. She's recognized as an innovative problem solver with broad knowledge of all areas in the waste and recycling business. She was born and raised in the Finger Lakes region of New York and currently resides outside of Albany. Our second panelist is Will Flower. Will is a senior vice president with Winter Brothers Waste Systems. Winter Brothers is Long Island's largest waste and recycling firm. He has over 37 years of experience in the area of solid waste management and environmental protection. Prior to his work at Winter Brothers, he worked in the director's office for the Illinois EPA. He also worked for Waste Management and later for Republic Services. He's a two-time recipient of the NWRA's Distinguished Service Award and the association's Chapter Leadership Award. He was also recognized with a Lifetime Membership Award from SWANA in 2018. And our third panelist is Marty Bellew. He's the commissioner of the Islip Department of Environmental Control and the president of the Islip Resource Recovery Agency. Marty has an extensive career in solid waste management, including the director of the Bureau of Waste Disposal Engineering, and the Bureau of Recycling for the New York City Department of Sanitation. Major accomplishments include the management of all material generated by the 9/11 attack. In addition, he was responsible for the operation and ultimate closure of the Fresco's landfill in Staten Island. He's responsible for setting up the waste export plan for New York City in order to close this landfill. In addition, he has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemical engineering. So just to reiterate what Kelly said about questions, you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom chat, but we'll primarily hold questions until the end of today's panel, and unless there's something that we feel like we can address sort of in line with the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Will.
Great, thanks, Bodhi, and thanks so much for the Federation for the opportunity to do this presentation. I know these are challenging times, and really that kind of sets the stage for where the industry and the private sector was at. If you think 2020 was difficult, all the challenges that we faced back in 2018 were reminiscent. Things were not going well in 2018. Let's take a look at that next slide real quick, Bodhi. So there were a lot of events, and clearly everybody heard about the focus on National Sword, and we don't want to get into that too much, other than to say that this was a evolutionary process that was occurring for a number of years. For a long time, once we implemented curbside recycling programs here in the United States, recyclables became a global commodity, and we're moving not only domestically, but started to move internationally as well. China set off some early signals that they were tired of getting contamination with Operation Green Fence, and they started to limit or at least inspect the inbound materials as early as 2013 and 2014. Of course, that led to Operation National Sword, which was a much greater restricting event that occurred. At the same time, there was some battles occurring with tariffs and other trade barriers that were being put into place. Next slide, please. again, what was going on is there was a constant movement of goods that were occurring where China was shipping or exporting materials to countries all over the world. So freighter ships like this were commonplace, that were constantly coming into different ports throughout the world. Of course, these ships would unload their goods, and then there were these containers that had to go back. And we, the United States, got really good at packing these containers with recyclables and shipping those back to China where they would be used as a raw material. Keep in mind that every single product that China exports has to go into some type of a cardboard box or container. Next slide, please. And if you look at this slide, very telling how quickly the changes occur. February 2017, this is just looking at plastics, 581,000 metric tons of material. Look at a year later down to February 2018, where it was just 23,900 metric tons. Just an incredible constriction of the pipeline. And when that happens, things start to back up very, very quickly, right? Go to the next slide, and you can see how quickly that material, plastics, paper, all types of recyclables were backing up. Main point here, if there is no markets, there is no recycling that's going to take place. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide as well. Then, of course, that causes or creates challenges for those of us that run recycling facilities, and that material starts to back up. This is a situation that just cannot occur because those recyclables, that is society, is producing this material on a daily basis, and we, the municipalities as well as the industry, have to have a way to manage that. So that's just kind of a starting point. We just wanted to set the stage, and then we want to, we're going to go to Andrea, who's going to talk about the current state of recycling.
Thanks, Will. So I would say that, you know, after all of this happened, we were all sitting here scratching our heads saying, what do we do? How do we fix this? What's going on? And that's when New York had the stakeholders meeting in August of 2018. And we all came together to start communicating to say, how can we, what's broken? How can we fix it? And what do we need to do? And I think that everybody's world was kind of rocked, right? Because municipalities were now getting pushed back because we needed to clean up the residue or the trash that was coming in. I think we all can agree that we need recycling. It's not going to go anywhere. The landfill capacity within the Northeast is continuously diminishing. I haven't seen any new landfills cited in my time in the waste industry. We needed to clean up the stream, right? Because now it was costing more to recycle than it was to landfill things. And the biggest thing I think that we took out of the whole national sword was people didn't know what to recycle. So we said, we need to re-educate everyone. So the economics need to work, right? So we need to make sure that there's, and we're going to kind of go through all of this today as we go through the presentation of how do we make that work? How do we fix what's broken? Regulatory, we need to revise and relook at all of these laws that were put into place over 25 plus years ago that maybe haven't been updated. Does it still work? And we needed to we need to really get the public trust back, right? Because all they were seeing is all of these negative articles of everybody's, you know, recycling is broken. It's nobody's recycling anymore. It's dying, you know, they're throwing everything away. But we need to let them know that that's not the case because we are going to continue to recycle. We just need to fix the process that's broken. If you can go to the next slide, this is just kind of, it shows kind of how the pressures were of what was happening when this happened, right? So the inbound pressure, we need to, everybody wanted to recycle more, but we need to continue to lower that contamination that was coming in, needed to keep costs low from the municipal, you know, sector of it or any of our customers. And then the outbound pressure is the mills are saying, you need to clean it up, you need to meet specifications, we need to make that material. And also all the while, the cost or what we were getting paid or paying to have that material recycled was depleting. And so we're kind of stuck in the middle, and we said, we really need to do something here. Everybody needs to come to the table. We need the manufacturers, the mills, the MRFs, the municipalities, everybody needs to be there, and we need to figure this out. And so that kind of leads us into, you know, as we were going through this whole entire process, is we realized that there was a lot of myths out there, right? That people are talking and not necessarily understanding the ins and outs of it. And so when Marty, Will, and I sat down, we said, you know, what if we do a session on what are the myths of recycling, right? What's out there, and how can we kind of talk around that? So I'm going to hand it over to you, Will. On the first
to talk about the first myth of recycling, and this has been around for many, many years. And the myth is that recycling is free. When I was first with Waste Management, we launched one of the first curbside recycling programs in the country. We quickly came to the realization that recycling is an expensive process. That being said, it's the right thing to do, right? We definitely see recycling as an excellent way to manage a piece of the solid waste stream. There is valuable materials that can be and should be used again. However, the cost of the collection, the processing, the transportation, the sale, the remanufacture is not cheap. Right? So let's talk a little bit about how those costs accrue. What we used to have in the 1970s, 1980s was one truck going down the street and picking up trash. And for the most part, other than some Boy Scout paper drives or a program to return bottles for reuse, that's the way that most waste was handled. Once we implemented in the 1980s curbside recycling programs, we immediately started to see the doubling of the collection cost. Pretty simple, is that you used to have one truck, now you have two trucks. You used to have a driver and a helper, now you have two drivers and two helpers. So essentially the cost of collection doubled on the expense side of the ledger. Then you talk about what happens to the material. The truck that's full of garbage goes to either an incinerator or a landfill. It gets tipped and emptied, and the material is either buried or incinerated for energy recovery. But on the recycling side, that truck which is full has to go to a recycling plant. So you needed to increase your infrastructure that was necessary to process this material, and that cost a lot of money. Unlike a landfill, there's a tremendous amount of equipment inside of a MRF that has to be purchased. It has to be constructed. It has to be maintained on a regular basis. And real recently, we've seen that it has to be replaced over time to become more effective and more efficient. So the cost of recycling has really gone up tremendously over time as we've worked to improve the processing of the recyclables that we get. Today, recycling typically costs more than disposal. I remember we were up at that meeting that Andrea mentioned, and there was someone from upstate New York who was pleading with the DEC, talking about how their cost of disposal was about $80 to $90 a ton. However, the cost of the recycling, the bill that they just got, was for $150 a ton. Again, the cost of recycling is not free. It's been increasing. The economics have really been disrupted by the situations that have occurred in the marketplace. And so there's this entire shift that's occurred in terms of the economics. So again, anytime you hear that recycling is free, you need to push back a little bit and make sure that people do understand the economics, both the macro and the microeconomics that are in effect here. I think, Marty, we're going to go to you to talk about the next myth. Marty, you're on. Marty, you're on. Just take your mute off.
Thanks, Will. The myth is everything can be recycled. But one of the reality of it is, and I'll put a disclaimer in here, not everything can be recycled at this time. Because I want to leave the door open that, you know, as time progresses, the markets will be generated, they'll be more creative, there will be more materials we can recycle as a function of what we recycle today. But one of the basic tenets of recycling, or the most important one, is education. Once we educate, then we become a cleaner stream, and that creates a better market for the materials that we collect. The town of Islip has a material recovery facility that services the residents of Islip, and we also handle 2 other municipalities, which is Southampton and Riverhead. I think everybody would be surprised what everybody throws away at times or considers to be recycling. Wish cycling is a problem, and that's solved through education. That's why it's one of the most important items of recycling. At our facility, some of the items that they find is pool liners, kids' plastic playhouses, fence parts, chain link, syringes. We also get small propane tanks and fire extinguishers. And that gives a point that shows that we have a household hazardous waste program, which takes the small propane tanks and fire extinguishers, but the residents thinking that it's just metal, they throw it into the metal, glass, and plastic. We are a bi-weekly service provider of MGP. But, you know, one of the things is we're going to constantly work on education, and you'll see later in the presentation that's what we're working towards. But the bottom line is, if there's no markets out there, there's no recyclable. So that's what we got to focus on for the recyclers to create markets for us, that we can recycle more commodities than we do now. And that leads us to, is Andrea next, Will?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So I think one of the biggest headlines I kept seeing throughout this whole thing over the last 2.5, 3 years was everybody wanted to blame single stream recycling, right, for National Sword, or they would say single stream is dead, we need to make a change. And I think that, you know, we realized, we reflected to say, what happened here, right? We went to single stream because this made it easier, more convenient for our residents to be able to recycle so that we could meet diversion goals, recycling rates. And I think where we realized where we missed the buck is we did not educate our residents or customers on what could go in the bin. And so it's very hard to process material when you have over 20% contamination. And we needed to take a step back and say, how do we fix this? And that was when, again, as you'll hear throughout this, is education. That is the biggest piece here. Knowing what goes in that recycling container makes all the difference, in conjunction with keeping up with the infrastructure, making any retrofit changes to, as the recycling stream or the waste stream continues to evolve, we need to stay up with that, right? What worked 10 years ago might not work now. You know, we might need to capture something different. And so it's expensive, but those are the infrastructure changes that need to happen. You can't just put something in and hope that it comes out. Again, because we're making, I deem us a manufacturer of a raw material because somebody's going to make that into something else. And so we need to make a very clean product to sell to those mills, and those mills hold us accountable for it. So I would say single stream is not dead. It's just we need to take those steps, take a step back, educate, make sure that we're processing to the best of our abilities as the processors, communicate with the mills, you know, how is our material, and also the, you know, the education of it. I would say that, you know, a lot of communities said, do we switch back to dual stream? And some did, and it worked, right? Because again, they went back and they re-educated everyone on what needs to go in here and how to do it. And yes, I'm sure that it caused some gray hairs for everybody, you know, those first few months, but it did work. And then there's other communities that committed to say, I'm going to stay with this. We've invested in multi-million-dollar infrastructure. Let's stay with it and let's figure it out. And they've been successful too. There's success stories all across the Northeast as far as how we've reduced contamination and started making a better product. All right, Marty, back to you.
Okay. Recycling is good for the environment. Yes, indeed. We all know that recycling is an environmental benefit. After the National Sword of China issue, the markets were about non-existent out in Long Island. So, for instance, facilities shut down because they backed up material. There was no way to market any of the material. They went into large retrofits. They're back open today, but it costs millions of dollars to retrofit these facilities. So after an extensive search, in Islip or nearby area, we finally found 2 viable facilities to deliver. That was, late last year. Prior to that, I was delivering the material to Brooklyn, and that was a considerable drive from Islip. But I got to go, I found a vendor in Brooklyn that would take the material, and it was pre-processed material that goes to Brooklyn. The price amazingly increased by about 50% as a result of all of this. So that's why, when you say it costs money to recycle, yes, it does. Now, currently, the situation is there's 3 vendors with the ability to accept material from our material recovery facility. But of course, a new issue has erupted. The last 2 years was China with the National Sword. This year, of course, it's COVID. The way the processing facility that we operate in Islip is, we have a sorting room where normally you would have 6 to 8 sorters located, and because of the health concerns, you could not operate that room. So essentially, for the first 3 months, for the safety and protection of the employees, we actually became a transfer station. That all the material that came in, we would send it out to the vendors that had the ability to operate. Since then, after 3 months, we've worked with the health regulations, and finally, what we're doing now is we recycle the glass out of the waste stream, and we recycle some metal. We're not fully back to processing because we're limited on space, but we're working on that. So these are the issues that come up for, you have to pay the price to recycle for the environment, which is okay. Thank you, Andrea.
It goes to me next, and we're going to get a little bit more granular in terms of talking about some of the recyclables. So there's a myth that glass is an excellent packaging product, and it can be and it should be recycled. And the reality is that is very true. Glass is, in fact, a great packaging product. It's widely used. It protects the material that is packaged in it. It is a material that can be and should be recycled. So in this case, the myth and the reality are in fact true. Glass is a great packaging material. But you need to understand, when it comes to how that glass is recycled, the way that we were doing things may present, in some cases, some challenges for making sure that the material stays as pure as it can. Because again, the processor's job today is a manufacturing job. We're trying to make a product. Essentially, we're taking society's waste and we're mining that material, we're segregating it, we're sorting it, we're cleaning it, we're doing a quality control, quality assurance process on it to make a material that manufacturers can then use that material again to turn it into a reusable material. And what we found with glass is that when glass is collected curbside, it tends to contaminate neighboring recyclables. It can cause problems. The same is conversely true, is that some of the other materials can also contaminate the glass and cause problems in terms of the glass purity. Additionally, glass is an abrasive material. It's essentially made from silica, which is sand, and it's very, very hard on processing equipment. It grinds down processing equipment, where everything in a MRF is turning or moving, and when that glass is going across the process, even hardened steel over time will wear out when it's exposed to glass for a long period of time. So the point being is there might be a better way to recycle glass, and drop-off programs or reclamation programs, buyback programs may be a better way, because we're able to then segregate and separate that program. We worked with some municipalities here on Long Island that made the decision to set up drop-off programs for their glass material. And as a result, we go out and we look at the glass and have no problem moving that material to markets where it can be used again and remanufactured again. Most importantly, and this goes to something that you'll continue to hear throughout this presentation, is that when you have a market for material, your problems all go away, right? Your problems go away when there's a demand for the materials that you're creating. And government can do and should work to expand markets for recyclables, such as especially the hard to handle or hard to market materials such as glass. For example, one thing that can easily be done is that in the procurement laws and in the bidding requirements and in the road construction laws or rules and guidance for the Department of Transportation, it states that glass may be used as part of the road-based construction material. Instead of may, that should simply be changed to must be used to create a demand for glass material. Again, glass can be used in road base, it can be used for drainage on construction projects, and it's a great material for that. Of course, what we prefer is the highest and best use, which is that material be maintained and produced in a fairly pristine way that it can then be shipped right back to another bottle manufacturer and be turned into a new product. That's the highest and best use. So again, I really want to stress that municipalities, the private sector, we all believe that glass can and should be recycled. It's a great packaging product, but there's just a better way, a smarter way to handle that material. And I think with that, we're going to talk a little bit about things that we can do to fix recycling or improve recycling. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how we can do that in rural, suburban, as well as urban New York, because New York is very diverse in terms of the geographic areas that we serve, and what may work in one area may not work in another area. So we really have to be mindful of the fact that there are some real rural areas in New York. There's a lot of suburban areas, and there's also New York City, which is an animal amongst it unto itself. Andrea, I think you're going to start off.
Yeah, and so again, we need to find markets to recycle, right? So that's the only way anything's recyclable is if somebody wants to buy it from you. And we were very excited. A couple months ago, Governor Cuomo had announced that they had made the commitment that the DEC is partnering with 3 SUNY schools to research how to improve recycling and waste management practices in New York State. More work remains, and the DEC's partnership with the SUNY schools will help us address the challenges we're facing across the state, and ensuring all the communities develop best practices to reduce the amount of solid waste generated. Let's see, DEC entered into a $1.9 million partnership with the University of Buffalo. A twofold objective. Research will focus on assessing the state of plastic recycling markets. I cut off the other part. I'll get back to you on that. And then the DEC entered into a 5-year, $5.75 million partnership with SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse to help establish the New York State Center for Sustainable Materials Management at ESF. And then DEC entered into a $4.2 million partnership with Stony Brook University for projects that include solid waste characterization, studies of recyclables and waste that analyze how these materials are processed to create more marketable materials. So we're on the path, right? We're heading in the direction of what we need to. We have a lot more work ahead of us, but at least we've made some steps forward in the right direction. Because again, I don't know that it's really been looked at over the last 15 to 20 years. And I think that when the markets, right, so glass has never really had a home for the last 10 to 15 years, but all of the other values of those recyclables kind of hid that didn't have a home. Okay, we could put it for beneficial use it as daily cover in landfills or road base in landfills. But there's a lot of markets that didn't have any place to send their glass to, but it was just kind of, it wasn't a big deal. And now all of these things kind of reared their ugly head throughout the whole national sword. And it gave us the ability to kind of start fresh. What do we need to do? These countries continued to say no more recyclable waste will be coming in, right? So China was the first. And then Southeast Asia followed pretty quickly behind because they were like, whoa, 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 we are not prepared. We can't handle all of this. And then India, right? And so now every day you continue to hear more of these countries. And so it just keeps making us say, we need to look in the mirror and we need to deal with this domestically. We need to find domestic markets. We need to help make these domestic markets so that we can continue to recycle. And there's plenty that we can do, right? Be it through grants, economic development throughout the communities, public-private partnerships, which we're going to continue to talk about. And that's how we're going to make this work. Will, I think it's over to you.
Yep, comes to me. So again, I think as Marty said, as Andrea said, and as I've said, market development is critical, but then you need to have the infrastructure in place to actually take the material from the curb and then convert it into a usable material that can be sold to the marketplace. And this infrastructure is critical. I'm talking about processing facilities. And that's an area where government can really do a lot to promote and encourage the investment that's needed. They can do this by issuing grants, by changing the tax code to include bonus depreciation, to provide tax credits or incentives. This can be done on a number of levels as well. We have IDAs throughout New York State. There's also the Empire Development Fund, which can be utilized. But it's critical that government have a helping hand in terms of developing this. Again, something as simple as, well, the first thing I should say is that there are some tax credits already in place. For example, there is no sales tax on recycling equipment in New York State. We want to make sure that continues. But bonus depreciation, where you're able to amortize or take your costs and make them quicker so that you're able to improve your cash flow, include your cash flow statements, help out tremendously. They help companies as they're doing their taxes. So bonus depreciation is something which is very valuable. It's something that the government still gets the full taxation, but allows us to take that depreciation a little bit quicker and gives us a tax break. So these are things that the government can and should be doing to encourage that. Again, these facilities cost a tremendous amount of money. Marty earlier was talking about having to take recyclables into Brooklyn to have them processed. And the reason that trip had to be made is that some of the facilities on Long Island needed to be rebuilt. They weren't able to produce the quality of material. As a result, we were having trouble selling materials. So we had to go back in. Winters Brothers ourselves invested $7.5 million in a new material recovery facility, rebuilt the entire facility. Now it produces a great product that we're able to move every single day. It would be an easier investment if we had some type of incentives that would allow us to continue to make the investments. And I think too, there's a lot of facilities such as Marty's plant and others where municipalities have facilities, and those municipalities also are facing the same situation that the private sector is, that those facilities have to regularly be upgraded, and grants should be available from the state to assist in that process. I think we're going to talk a little bit about education, and Marty, you're gonna cover that.
Okay. Thanks, Will. One of the things I mean, we're well aware of now is, it seems like every year we have a new issue that hits recycling, whether it be the national sword. This year is COVID, but the remnants of COVID, hopefully it's over, but the remnants on the budgetary side will be hit next year. So next year, for those townships that are doing their budgets, there's limited amount of funds available, and they're always looking to, to save money on funds. So recycling is one that you have to stand strong for and keep it on the budget docket. So looking at that is everybody should be looking at the New York State DEC because they have a tremendous amount of grants available. For instance, in waste reduction and prevention projects, recycling capital projects, household hazardous waste projects, and recycling coordination and education grants. That involves hiring, you get a recycling coordinator, which is invaluable to help your municipality in promoting the education for recycling. The grant itself covers the salary and fringe benefits for a recycling coordinator, for public education and outreach. Some direct costs that it affects right away is recycling guides, brochures, and web pages, along with recycling signs and displays. And of course, we have giveaway items. Now, my recycling coordinator, most of the time was giving tours or talks at the schools, to educate the students on the recycling and the benefits and why you should recycle. And of course, now with COVID, that has taken a drastic turn. So we're working currently with the town photographer and videographer to develop what I'll call 10 to 15 minute environmental modules. I call it environmental modules because, recycling is a benefit to the environment, but there are other issues or other programs in the town. So I kind of wanted to make a series. So for instance, the 5 pieces of the environmental modules that we're going to work on are composting, the MRF, the material recovery facility, the C&D landfill that we own, the resource recovery facility, and the shellfish cultural facility where we grow oysters and clams. We're going to make a professional module about what happens in all of these facilities, and we're going to have a focus on recycling. As far as composting, what's the benefit of composting? What's the benefit of your metal, glass, and plastic, and your paper? Because at the MRF we handle both commodities each week. Each bi-weekly. And then we'll make up since I have 5 subjects, I'm looking for another one and we're hoping to get it is after we deliver the processing material to a vendor, like say, for instance, Winter Brothers, they deliver the material to another vendor for processing. So hopefully we can make another module of that facility that shows what really happens to the material after it's been processed actually the second time by Winters Brothers, so that the individuals understand fully how it is a benefit to the environment and why it's so important to recycle. In addition, these modules will be put on the town's website, for the residents to view, and they'll be announced at all the town boards meetings, every month. In addition, now I'd like to talk a little bit about the state DEC. They started a Recycle Right program in 2018. I think Andrea mentioned that the stakeholders went to Albany. There's a series of stakeholder meetings across the state to address the stressors in the recycling industry. The Recycle Right program focuses, as a result of those meetings, on one item per month that should either be in recycling or the items that should be out because it is a contaminant. Some examples of the initial monthly items that were included were, for instance, textiles, food diversion, composting, aluminum and steel cans, and batteries. I mean, the Recycle Right program from the state DEC, it provides free downloadable social media posts, images, and short paragraphs for articles and newsletters that organizations use to promote good recycling habits. This is critical. This is critical for us, and the recycling coordinator uses most of that material to promote recycling in the town. In addition, the New York State DEC is working with the SUNY Syracuse College for Environmental Science and Forestry to bring their second level of initiative out, which they hope comes out next year. They're building a website to provide information. The website will be the New York State Center for Sustainable Materials Management. We are fortunate to know or announce today that there'll be a stakeholder meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. And anybody interested, please contact Lisa Danielle Ruggiero. And her website is here, ldruger at syracuse.edu. So that's very important. Now, one other item I want to mention is we are a climate smart community in Islip. That's through a NYS certification. And because we have that NYS certification, it opens up the doors for some other grants. Most of them are energy concerned, but in addition, they also have an organics from the state DEC. They have grants for organics through the state DEC if you are a climate smart community. So I'd like individuals to just pay attention that that's available, nowadays. Thank you.
All right. So we have another big thing that is very important in improving recycling is the legislative piece of it, right? And we anticipate a pretty robust legislative agenda in the 2021. And I would say that a big part of that is, Will's gonna go into this a little bit, is fixing the bottle bill, right? This is a very antiquated program that was put into place. It was to reduce litter. It was a great program at the time, but it hasn't been updated in many, many years. And we need to relook at that, see what's really working. I would say that the majority of New York State has access to curbside collection now, and that really needs to be addressed. The other thing that's going to be, I think, at the top of the list is extended producer responsibility. And we need to make sure, as all stakeholders in this, that we come up with a fair EPR program. Municipal recycling costs have increased due to commodity market declines, and state and federal interest in EPR has grown tremendously since National Sword. And everybody's looking for alternative supplementary ways to pay for recycling programs. The goal of EPR for packaging is to reduce waste and recycling costs for municipalities while incentivizing producers to design with products and packaging for recycling. We agree with that. But we need to make sure that in order to have a successful EPR program, we have to strengthen markets for recycled commodities. We need to encourage the producers to design for recyclability and reuse, and require producers to phase out problematic chemicals. And so when he goes into EPR programs that need to include the establishment of a stewardship organization, should ensure that recyclable collectors and processors will be well represented, and that include any distribution of funds should ensure that the communities without municipal collection program or contracts, which a large majority of upstate New York is. If you look at rural upstate New York, that's a very heavily subscription market. And in your cities along the 90 corridor or down going towards the city, yes, you have municipal collection, but there's a large part of it that is subscription based. How do we get those funds to those people? So again, it just needs to be all stakeholders sitting at the table to make sure that we design the proper program for EPR. And funding for new infrastructures and encouraging design. And so then we have advocacy for private partnerships, minimum content language or legislation that would then encourage that supply and demand, as we've talked about. And Will, I think that you're going to touch a little bit on the illegal dumping laws and stronger persecution.
I am, because we've had some real issues here on Long Island with illegal dumping. And it's not a new problem. It's been going on for some time. But what we typically see is as the cost of recycling go up, there are unscrupulous individuals that will engage in criminal activity, namely the illegal dumping of materials. And in some cases, we've had a situation right here in Marty's town that he's been involved with, of a cleanup of a public park where illegal dumping had occurred. They were putting in contaminated soils inside of this park, and then the individuals were caught. They were prosecuted. I think they were given a slap on the wrist and turned loose. Clearly, we want to see stronger stronger legislation, and we did. The governor signed legislation a few months ago to increase the severity of illegal dumping laws, which is great. We thought the governor did a good job. We advocated strongly for that position. And one of the challenges that we see here, and I think any municipality that sees a disruption in their marketplace is going to be faced with, especially when a landfill closes or a transfer station closes, and you see a large increase in the cost of managing solid waste. Some of these illegal activities will increase. We know here on Long Island, the Brookhaven landfill is going to close in the year 2024. We're trying to get ahead of that and ensure that there are really strong pieces of legislation on the book to guard against illegal dumping and really penalize and go after the people that engage in that type of activity. And that's more than just the legislation. One of the other things that has to then occur is the enforcement of these laws. And enforcement, just like we're having a seminar to talk about solid waste, I think it would be a great idea if the New York Attorney General, the New York DEC, and the district attorneys throughout the state would get together and have a seminar on how do we actually aggressively investigate, prosecute, and put these people in jail that are engaging in illegal dumping activities. So again, the prosecution is critical, and holding these people accountable for their actions are very critical. This represents just a little bit about some of the things, some of the legislative agenda that needs to be advanced in 2021 and beyond. I think what Andrea talked about, which is most important, is that when we talk about legislation, everybody deserves a seat at the table, right? If it's fixing the bottle bill or dealing with EPR or dealing with any legislative issue, we should probably get everybody involved, right? The brand owners, the manufacturers, the folks that are collecting materials, the folks that are processing the materials, and have a seat at that table. Most importantly, it's critical for the municipalities to get there. In most cases, it is the citizens who are paying the bill. They are represented by the municipalities, and they absolutely have to be at the table to make sure that their interests are being advocated for, and that they're being protected, and we've got legislation that works for everybody. We're going to get a little bit more granular in the next slide and talk about modernizing the bottle bill. The bottle bill, as Andrea mentioned, a little bit antiquated piece of legislation. It was passed back in the 80s as a deterrent to littering, and it was passed in an era when we didn't even have curbside recycling yet. Things have changed, and unfortunately, the bottle bill has remained the same. I can almost guarantee that in 2021, the bottle bill and updating the bottle bill, or what I call modernizing the bottle bill, will be part of the governor's budget message, because I think the bottle bill can be changed to make it better. I think, and this was a question that I saw that was posed, can the bottle bill be enhanced by including wine and spirit bottles? That is exactly what needs to be done, right? Is that you need to increase the scope and also the monetary value placed onto those other bottles, right? Right now, everything is a nickel deposit on some glass items and aluminum cans and plastic bottles. But if you were to increase that, instead of a nickel, increasing it to a dime, I would dare say in some cases it should be a quarter, because then you really got a situation where you're making the person who decides not to recycle, who just decides to throw that material away, they're having a punitive effect, because they're going to lose a quarter or a dime every time that they throw something away. So the first thing that needs to be done is to increase the value that's placed on that container. Instead of a nickel, let's take it to a dime. Let's consider a quarter for an item. And then also, we really need to increase the scope of the items that have the deposit placed on them. There is no reason, there is absolutely no legitimate reason, other than some really good lobbyists, that the wine and spirit industry does not have this deposit on liquor and wine bottles. It makes no sense to not include them in the recycling process. So that's a big change that should definitely occur. I think we also want to talk a little bit, Andrea, I think this next slide is going to go to you.
And I just had a quick one. So, and I don't know if you mentioned it, but as far as putting the valuable materials that the MRFs are designed to take, such as PET and all those different ones, back into the bin, and taking out the ones that are very hard for markets, you know, that need to have a cleaner product, such as the glass. Is that?
Yeah, you know, that's another good point. We can have it seems like the bottle bill is such a big issue. We could spend a lot of time on it, but
Yeah.
If you're, you know, when you look at the value of each commodity and you realize that the infrastructure has developed to handle a lot of these materials, it might be better to take some of the deposits off of certain items like aluminum, like plastic containers, because New York does have has developed a fairly good infrastructure. And most importantly, that would then take that value and allow that to flow to the material recovery facilities or the recycling plants. And what's important there then is that that's going to help municipalities, because there's a cost that's associated with running these facilities. The revenue at these plants occur from really just two sources. Number one, the municipality or the customer pays to a processing fee for the materials to be processed, and then there's a sale of material that occurs for the material. If more aluminum, more plastic were to flow to, and more tin cans were to flow to the MRFs, that would increase their revenue, thereby allowing them to get a better economy of scale and operate more effectively at a higher revenue rate, thereby saving money for municipality and for commercial customers who are paying for recycling. You wonder if that is going to get traction with the environmental community, because they may say, well, we don't want to change the way that recyclables are, or we don't want to take something out of the bottle bill. But the reality is, putting it into a curbside program, with the exception of glass, may in fact make recycling much more economic sense.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying. All right, so we'll go to the next slide here. So this kind of all together, I found this, you know, in a lot of the research that I've done, the Washington State asked the University of Washington, let's see here, got it. I lost it, but they did this whole entire study on how do we make recycling sustainable? How do we fix it? You know, the Pacific Northwest, they had very antiquated equipment across the state, right? And they were probably in the most trouble, I would say, in the United States after National Sword, because the equipment wasn't up to date and they relied so heavily on China to take all of their materials. They really had to start back from square one. I think that we were very fortunate. We do have domestic markets here, but not as many as we would like to see. And to look at a successful recycling program, you see that the partnerships are a huge portion of it, right? And being able to be in communication, because we have to communicate what's going on. And I think that we realized that across the state at the stakeholders meetings that they held, you know, for multiple times, is people who were kind of doing their own thing, maybe recreating the wheel when they didn't need to, didn't realize that there was something that might help them, or there was a market locally. And that's where, again, it's communication, it's being good partners, it's the contractual assistance, which if you'll just flip down, Bodhi, to the next slide, or maybe 2 down, or 3. I thought I moved this around. I apologize. The Recycling Partnership, they put together a very comprehensive guide on how to develop a contract with a material recovery facility for the municipality and the MRF, so that, you know, like all contracts, the best MRF processing contract is one that clearly recognizes and protects the interest of both parties, and the result in an agreement that both sides would consider fair. If there is floor pricing, I think that we saw so many facilities that it crumbled people, right? There was facilities shut down or different things like that, as far as it didn't work. And for a good partnership, everybody has to be happy, and you have to take that risk and reward. New York State, one thing that I'm hoping that we can all continue to talk about is updating our proposal process. There's still a lot of bids that I receive every single day, and when it comes to recycling, you cannot give a flat number. It is not going to be a good partnership. We need our procurement to update how they're looking for their partners. It needs to be a request for proposal where you can do alternatives, so you can explain that there's a formula base. These are commodities. They change every single month. And it might be protecting the municipality, but it's not really if that business goes out of business. If you go back up, Bodhi, and I can send a link, but if you haven't seen that site, they've done a really good job of walking you through how to put together a fair agreement. Like we talked about, policy, recycling content laws, product stewardship. We need to continue to divert from the landfills. We need to continue to research, which New York State has made the commitment to invest in. They are working with these universities, and I think that we're going to get some really great things. It's not going to be tomorrow, but it's going to be in the near future. And then the financial assistance, like we talked about, the grants. How are we helping the both private sector and the public sector? What can we do? What more can we do? We can't just, because something's in place, stop. We need to continue to grow these programs. And I think that I got, oh, and then the other thing that I just wanted to talk about really quickly, it's on a few of the slides, is how do we develop a task force, you know, where it's a tri-state area to plan for better recycling. Marty, were you going to talk on this one, or I don't know?
No, I think Will was.
Okay, it was me. Will, are you going to do this one? You going to take this one?
Yeah, we can, you know, certainly, I think in our discussions, and everybody realizes that there needs to be a lot of planning that goes into any type of program, especially one as complex as recycling. So when we look at the need for that planning, you also have to realize, as we said at the beginning of this discussion, that New York is diverse in that we have rural, suburban, urban areas that we have to plan for. And when you also think about the brand owners and their obligation to participate, and I would say their desire to participate, that task force are really a good way to take a look at this. They may be regional in nature. And when I say regional, we may even want to include a tri-state perspective to take a look at what we're doing across the borders and what some other states are doing. But it's only through that planning process that we're going to come up with good and effective ways to recycle more materials. Again, the critical role that consumer packaging plays in the generation of solid waste has to be understood, and the consumer packaging people have done a phenomenal job improving their packaging. They still have a long way to go, but they need to get hooked up with us on the processing side to understand the challenges that some of their packaging creates for us, so that they can re-engineer it, redesign it to make less to make less waste. A couple of years ago, the state of Connecticut did a regional task force on packaging, and one of the things we started to look at was what are some of the solutions, and how could we work together to create a better recycling program, given that the consumer is producing a tremendous amount of packaging waste that needs to be managed. And then what we did is we also looked at what other solutions were there. How could EPR potentially improve the way that waste is being recycled. So again, the most important things are let's not be afraid to get together. I don't think there's been enough discussion, enough planning. I think people have focused on their roles of saying, look, the DEC is a regulatory agency. I think the DEC needs to step up and take on a bigger role in terms of facilitating some of these task force. The governor's office can mandate the task force. And most importantly, the task force needs to be represented by all of us and also the brand owners and the manufacturers. We need to get everybody at the table to talk about some of these solutions.
Yeah, well, if I could take a minute. When we met with the state DEC last year, about when national sword affected us and we couldn't find any markets for it, we learned that there's a lot of markets outside of New York State that you probably could try to go to, but there's an issue with how do you get it there. Long Island is unique as far as the state, so any solution that might work upstate, probably wouldn't work, downstate. I mean, one of the problems we have is transportation. I mean, they're starting to look at that and try to increase the availability of rail transportation, things like that. And until that's done, that even helps the recycling vendors that are out here now, because they have to move all the stuff mostly on truck, and it goes through New York City. So that's problematic to start with. So, and that affects the price and everything else. So, the joint task force, that would be great, because then we could be talking about these issues and seeing how to resolve them.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's where we realized we missed the boat a little bit, is we were leaving people out, right? There weren't people at the table that needed to be at the table that were large parts of those decisions. I don't know if we even talked about it, but the trucking, right? That was another huge thing that just kind of crushed recycling. And so how can we help that communication?
One other thing too, and Marty, thanks for bringing that up, that task force, we don't want to think of added bureaucracy and you think, gee, a task force is going to be created, but nothing good is going to come out of it.
Yes.
I don't think that's the case. And Marty and I and several other folks from Long Island participated in the Long Island Solid Waste Leadership Council 2 summers ago, where we were given a task, and we took a look at the management of solid waste, and we broke it down into several different areas, such as recycling, construction and demolition waste, municipal solid waste, transportation issues, storm debris, and each one of those areas was chaired by a public sector person and a private sector person. And our task was to come up with simple recommendations in the short term, mid-range, and long-term that needed to be done to enhance the management of one of these different areas of waste management. Again, recycling, construction and demolition waste, transportation, storm debris management. And we were given a short time frame to get that done. Within 90 days, that task force had a recommendation. I think we ended up with 27 or 30 recommendations that we were able to start advancing. One of which I'm proud to say was that whole issue of trying to increase the penalties for illegal dumping, and we pushed that and got that passed through the General Assembly, and the governor was good enough to support that. These are the kinds of things that can happen very fast if you just kind of keep the focus close, fairly tight, and also make sure that there's a deadline. We don't have to study things for years. We have to go in and get the right people. And again, there's really smart people on the private side, really smart people on the public sector, really smart regulators, really smart manufacturers that should all be at the table to come up with quick solutions that can effectively and quickly improve recycling in New York.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, so we can go past these ones. We already touched on this.
Marty, I think this is you.
It is.
Okay. We'll take a minute to talk about the conclusions. Of course, recycling, like solid waste, is a dynamic process, as we see and we talked about today. It's always constantly changing, and solutions will not be easy, and they may indeed be regional. I mean, we just talked about it, how I feel, in my opinion, Long Island is unique, and it's unique for several reasons, rather than other parts of the state. But it doesn't mean that a solution can't be provided. But every single one of them, bears a price to it, and you have to look at that and then figure out the best option. I mean, our goal as recyclers is to move as close as we can to zero waste. So each and every initiative, no matter how small, will help in attaining this goal. So I just want to mention one. So it's a little bit off the normal, but it's a recycling initiative that we started here. It's in Islip and a couple other towns in Long Island. There's half shells for Habitat, which is an oyster recovery project by CTOC. You collect used oyster shells from the restaurants, you deliver to the composting facilities. We have one in Islip. And it'd be set out in the sun and turned every 3 months. And then when cured, they're used for shore stabilization and oyster reef growth. I mean, to date, 70,000 pounds have been removed. So this is, while it's a small initiative, it's something to mention that, as time goes on, there are many, many, many solutions for recycling. It's not just, I mean, the main tenets of recycling, of course, is metal, glass, and plastic, and the paper. But there are smaller ones that I know people and groups are working towards, which takes it out of the waste stream, which helps the overall recycling effort, which helps the environment. And that's one of the issues that comes up. So the bottom line, the next slide, Andrea. The bottom line that we should stay focused and keep being creative. Anything we can come up with that helps or improves recycling. And the recyclers continue to make markets available. Markets is one of the keys for us to recycle as much material as we can. And in closing, I'd like to read the paragraph that kind of sums it all up. Recycling works when all stakeholders, municipalities, recyclers, brand owners, industrial consumers, manufacturers, regulators, and others work together to identify solutions to the ever-changing list of consumer products entering the recycling stream, while also ensuring that we meet the needs of the industrial consumer at the end of the chain to ensure a quality commodity product. And we firmly believe in it, and this is the only way that recycling works. So we have to just keep progressing forward as much as we can. And we will see recycling increase over the next few years.
I think, Bodhi, you want to take some questions at this point? I see there's several that have been submitted on the Q&A line. Bodhi, you're on mute.
Yep, you're on mute.
So first, let's go back and talk a little bit more about the bottle bill. So I guess the first question was just, can you just talk a little bit about the markets for bottle bill collected glass versus curbside recycled glass?
Right. So Kendall has hit the nail right on the head, right? He's very familiar with the issue and understands the challenges, but it is in fact curbside glass that presents a problem because of two things. Number one, glass is a contaminant of neighboring recyclables, and conversely, the neighboring recyclables are a contaminant of the glass. So by keeping glass separate, we can go a long way to improve glass recycling in New York. But as along with that is also the important need for market development in terms of making sure there's markets for that glass. So that's again, Kendall hit it right on the head, that it really focuses on what type of glass we're talking about and how do we get it from the consumer so that we can recycle it in a good way.
Perfect. And then the next question was about the impacts on deposit locations with expanded bottle bill to take in the wine and liquor bottles as well as other non-alcoholic glass containers.
Yeah, I don't think, I think if you added more, if you increased the cost of the deposit, you're going to get more recyclables. If you did what, another way to make the change is to reduce some of the materials that have the deposit to let the more valuable materials and the materials that can be recycled, such as aluminum, metal, and plastics, go into a MRF instead of going back to a redemption center. It really wouldn't change the deposit locations at all. The grocery stores would actually probably like it better because they would simply have to have instead of having 5 or 6 machines, they would need one to focus on glass, possibly a few more if we wanted to separate by color. In terms of the infrastructure, it really wouldn't change because we're still advocating keeping the deposit bill in place, but really having it strongly applied to glass, but it wouldn't really change the deposit locations at all.
Right. Is there any impact to the larger bottles that aren't necessarily part of the bill now in terms of infrastructure for that deposit collection?
Yeah, the machines may have to change a little bit to handle a gallon jug of wine or something like that, but I think those changes are easily made over time.
All right. So we're going to move on to EPR a little bit. So I guess, can you summarize a little bit about the existing EPR programs and or proposals? Either, and I know that there are some that are in the works for being implemented that have passed the legislation, and then others that are in the legislature now. And then we talk about specifically how long implementation would take for some of those proposals.
Yeah, I think so. I know, because I know Andrew's he talked a little bit that they've got the session next week, and maybe we defer to that one a little bit to say, tune in next week for a deep dive into EPR. To answer that first one, and Marty, I don't know, but I have no idea how long this would take because I don't think that we're all in agreement on what it looks like yet. So as soon as we figure out what that looks like, is really going to be the factor on how long it would take to implement something like that.
Yeah, EPR has been implemented in some European countries and also in Canada, in some parts of Canada. Again, since we don't know what it looks like, it's hard to determine. But in those other states, it's typically a 2 to 3 year process. the main thing we have to focus on first is what does EPR look like here? Because I think there is a way that EPR can work. I think EPR can be extremely beneficial to municipalities, but I want to make sure that any monies that are collected in the EPR program, in fact, get to municipalities. We can't have a situation where the state of New York takes that money and puts it into the general revenue fund. Let's look at the bottle bill, right? The sheets on the bottle bill is a prime example. I think that money that is collected by the state, which is really just a tax, in fact, should be used for environmental programming. Years ago, all that money was taken by the state and now represents a pretty significant amount of money that the state needs. Let's face it, the state is in really difficult financial situation because of COVID and the pandemic, and they're going to be looking for a lot more revenue. I don't want EPR to be a situation where it's simply a hidden tax. It needs to be a situation where the money actually is collected, goes and doesn't even go into the government hands, instead goes to a not-for-profit organization, which is comprised of manufacturers, processors, and municipalities to oversee the distribution of that money to municipalities to improve recycling. That's really the only way that I can see the industry getting behind EPR.
Right, and so when you're talking about EPR, you're talking about for packaging and printed products specifically for this one, right? Because we do have existing EPR programs, and I know that the paint EPR is in progress now, and we're looking at other proposals for alkaline batteries, and those, right? So you're talking specifically about the packaging.
Yeah, that is correct. You're right. There are other EPR programs, and those actually can work a little bit quicker. I think when we're talking about the more, the one on packaging, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. And one other thing we really like to see is EPR on lithium batteries. And lithium batteries create a very big challenge for every one of us that operates a transfer station or a recycling facility because of the threat to fire. The public doesn't understand it, and they're creating a really dangerous situation in material recovery facilities, recycling facilities, and transfer stations, not just here in New York, but throughout the United States. When you look at the tremendous increase in the number of fires that have been occurring in these facilities. So you've got a really dangerous situation. We've got it on tires, on paints. I've seen states put it in on mattresses. Lithium batteries is something that definitely should be addressed.
Yeah, well, I want to mention is on the bottle bill, to me, there's two parts. One is the actual deposit and one is a processing fee. So when you talked earlier, the processing fee goes to the state and then goes into the general fund, of people that don't collect, that don't return the bottles. But in essence, they may be in our refuse that we collect at the MRF or other facilities. We have SUNY through state DEC is doing a waste characterization study of our facility, plus other facilities. And I'm hoping to try to use that they can identify, how much bottle deposits we get and maybe somehow directly get that processing fee, rather than it go into the state, but this is just something I've been trying to think about, over the last several months.
Good point.
Absolutely. All right. So to sort of wrap that up, Andrew did want to clarify that EPR, the money collected under EPR, is not collected by the state. I think it's not technically a tax. But also, for more information on all of this, next Thursday morning, they were going to have a panel as part of the Federation virtual conference, and it will look into the packaging and printed paper EPR specifically, with stakeholder perspectives from local government haulers and brand owners as well. So, all right, moving on. Let's see. So I think one question, can you provide specific reasons why we need to rinse out things like our yogurt containers to be able to more adequately explain that?
Andrea, I'll let you take a shot at this. You operate some really quality material recovery facilities, and I can Marty, we all are operators on this call, which is unique. So we can all comment on that, but I'll let Andrea go first. Your mute button is still on.
How about now?
Gotcha.
Good.
All right. We don't like rodents, right? So any type of waste or anything like that that draws them in, we like to keep them at bay. And I think the other thing that we would say is a lot of people's perception of how much is still left in there is different, right? So they might think, oh, it's about pretty much done, and there's still half yogurt in there. They throw it in and contaminate everything else. So we always just say that no food waste, you know, so that it doesn't contaminate the other recyclables and doesn't draw on the rodents. How about you, Will and Marty?
Okay, well, I'll speak a second. I mean, there's a number of issues. I mean, to help, like, for instance, we deliver some of our material to Will. I mean, for him to market it, you know, it has to be a clean material. We learned this through the national sword, you know, that the cleaner, the better. So that's one reason. But the other reason at our facilities, I'm a little more concerned on safety and health also. You have all that material in there, and because recycling is fluid and it changes, you know, you may have backups and all, and now you have all of that material that could be a health issue. So that's why we want to get it all cleaned up to protect the workers. That's another reason.
Yeah, and again, it really goes to the fact that we're trying to, you know, we can collect it, we can process it, but then we have to sell it, and the people that we sell it to are demanding that the products be clean. They're buying, in the case of a yogurt container, it's probably polypropylene #5 recyclables. But we have to move that material. It has to be clean. If it has too much food waste, it's a problem. If it was just you know, one individual, one container, not a problem. But a MRF is a place where just millions of pounds of material come together. And even if it's a small amount of waste or residual food that's in a container, it starts to add up very, very dramatically, and is a problem. And if it's too much, you know, we use optical sorters, and that uses air and air blast to move materials. If there's too much material, that air blast is not going to be enough to sort that material. So again, let's, you know, part of our education program should be everybody who is a good recycler is a person who rinses and dries an item before it's placed in a container, before it's placed into the bin for collection.
Thanks, guys. So just want to give a shout out to Noah Moderator, who is on the call. He's a 12-year-old, and he started his own company in March and has recycled over 20,000 bottles this year. So thanks for joining, Noah, and thanks for letting us know. That's great.
Definitely a shout out to Noah. Great job. And if he wants to take a tour of a facility, he should get in touch with one of us, because we'd love to show him our process. Congratulations to him. Noah, just to give you some perspective, we restarted our facility in April, and just last week recycled our 20 millionth pound of recyclables. So anytime you want to take a tour, just give me a call, and we'd love to show you our facility.
Yeah, thanks for jumping
likewise.
on, Noah. We heard you might be on here as a guest appearance, so we're glad you made it.
Yeah, Noah, you should be commended for the work you're doing. And anytime you'd like to take a visit, you're always welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks, Noah. Question, are there any curbside bottle and can services in New York? Is that specifically New York City? I guess, can either any of you talk to both of those, New York State and or New York City? I assume that's bottle bill collection?
Yeah, so there's, let's see if I could try to, there are curbside programs that accept bottles and cans in New York and in New York State. So you're talking curbside. I would assume, let's just make some assumptions here that they're talking about New York City first. New York City does have a very aggressive recycling program. They have a processing facility, which I think is one of the best in the entire United States. It's run by Tom Outerbridge, who's just a regular participant in these events, and does a phenomenal job. So I think the answer is yes, they have these programs, and a lot of the material. Very interestingly, we were talking a little bit about transportation. Very interestingly, a lot of the material that goes into the Sims facility in New York actually arrives by barge and is then offloaded, because most of New York is surrounded by water, and they're able to move materials by barge. But Marty used to run that program for New York City.
Yeah, no, you're right. Sims, they barge from the Bronx, actually, which is nice, and they have barge from Brooklyn. So, they're centrally located over there in Southwest Brooklyn. So, that's pretty good. But I think I'm confused. Bottle and can curbside. I'm thinking of, I guess, litter baskets on the corner where they have the tops for bottles and cans to kind of, limit the amount of people that just throw trash out, so you get a cleaner product. And that's curbside too, I guess.
Absolutely. All right, so I meant to give this topic a little bit more time, but we had some great questions. But I wanted to wrap up. Kendall pointed out there's a pretty broad agenda for this session, and if we could give sort of our top 3 ideas, initiatives for the coming year. I don't know if each of you wants to give your top 1, or if you want to give your top 1, 2, or 3. We'll start with you, Andrea.
All right. So I would say markets. We need markets. We need to continue to educate. I have to go with 4 because I can't choose 3, but markets, educate, communicate, and legislative. So, I mean, and I can't really put those in an order because they were all equally as important. So that's what I would say.
All right, well.
So I saw Kendall's question. I wrote down an aggressive legislative agenda that focuses on EPR, minimum content, and fixing the bottle bill. That is aggressive and going to require everybody to work together. Number 2 is planning, and even though planning isn't quick, sometimes it does take time, but it's good to plan. And then market development is critical. Allowing focus, starting initiatives now. Again, that's another thing that takes some time, but if we don't start now, it's going to be a problem. So market development is critical to recycling working.
Absolutely. And Marty, do you want to wrap us up with your
Okay,
idea?
my 3 is, my number 1 is to reduce contamination in the waste stream, in the recycling product. And that's done through, my 2nd is education, a big educational program, and I spoke about it a little today. And then as a result of doing those 2 things, that will generate markets. So that'll be the 3rd thing. That once the material is pristine, I guess, in one word, is, there'll be availability of markets, more availability of markets.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Kelly, if you're on, I'm just going to hand it back to you to finish that up.
All right, thank you, Bodhi, and thank you for all of our panelists. Thank you for all the great questions that we got. And a shout out to Noah, our youngest inspirational viewer. So there is the 2nd session this afternoon starting at 1:30. I'd invite you all the attendees to come back for that. And until then, we will sign off and see everyone again at 1:30. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody.